Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Solar Hub at the International Solar Alliance's pavilion here at COP30 in Belém, the heart of the Amazon. You know, there could have been no better place to celebrate the collective climate action than here, surrounded by the nature's resilience and the spirit of the Mutirao, the Brazilian tradition of coming together to build something greater than ourselves. That's the spirit that defines us at ISA, an alliance built on ambition to action. We have been re energized with a new vision, one that is bold, inclusive, and driven by action oriented platforms, implementation focused analytics, and customized risk mitigation instruments powered by the collective will and support of our 125 member countries. ISA stands proud as a global South anchored intergovernmental organization dedicated to everything solar. For us, solar is not just a source of energy, it's a source of hope, resilience, and opportunity, connecting the social, environmental, and the economic dimensions of sustainable development. Our vision is actually implementation focused with very clear goals. By 2030, we intend to deploy over 1.6 gigawatts of solar and cut around 7 million tons of CO2 emissions annually. Look at electrifying 18 million people across our member countries by 2030, create over 3.7 million jobs, and train over 150,000 people and democratize solar knowledge through our ISA Academy. Our achievements over the last year demonstrate that solar energy is not just about mitigation. It's also about adaptation, empowerment, and equity. Our true strength lies in partnerships, because while one nation can light a village, together we can illuminate the world. This pavilion celebrates the unity. It's a space for ideas, innovation, and collaboration. Over the next 10 days, it will serve as a hub of solar energy and exchange, reflecting the momentum of this Amazonian COP, a COP of implementation. What I would urge all of you is to walk around. We have all our work, our member countries, our key platforms displayed all across the pavilion, because the sun belongs to everyone. And when we work together under its light, we not only power our homes, but also our shared futures. So thank you and welcome to the first session at the ISA Pavilion at COP30. And as I just mentioned that, you know, we are as strong as our partnerships. Our first session is from our partner institute, SE4All, who've been a steadfast partner since the time ISA was formed. And Tamojit has been extremely kind and has asked me to deliver the opening remarks. You know, I started my journey in energy efficiency 13 years ago. And when I saw the title of this session on integrating demand side management and energy efficiency into clean energy transition, it really piqued my interest. I think this conversation comes at a defining moment. It could not have come at a better time. The global community last year rallied on two clear goals on tripling renewables and doubling the rate of energy efficiency. And for us, these are not parallel tracks. They are mutually reinforcing levers, you know, to determine how fast and fairly the world decarbonize. And the evidence is compelling also. Some of the things that we have been working on over the last 2-3 years, you know, when efficiency and renewables are pursued in tandem, global primary energy demand could fall by 25% by 2030 compared to the business as usual pathway. Of course, we all know the benefits of energy efficiency, but the real power of integration and optimization comes in when demand side action unlocks supply side transformation. And that's why the synergy between renewables and efficiency is central in achieving both sustainability and affordability. The recent IRENA and UNEP analysis that we were working on shows that coupling of all of this could increase the RE share in the total energy use by up to 30% by 2030, compared to less than half if these are pursued in isolation. And for every 1% gain in efficiency saves around $15 billion US annually in global energy system costs. And that's precisely the space where ISA and SE4All started to collaborate and will continue to collaborate, aligning efficiency and clean energy deployment across the global South. Let me close my remarks by expressing sincere gratitude to the SE4All for their steadfast partnership. And, let me hand it over to Tamojit for the first session. Tamojit, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Karan. And let me echo your sentiments, especially in terms of the close partnership that we have had over the years, and for hosting us at your pavilion. Congratulations again. You did mention the sun is for everyone. So with those inspiring words, let me begin today's session. So we have a lineup of amazing speakers today. So without further ado, we'll first begin with our fireside chat. And this chat features two leaders who have been at the forefront of energy transition and thinking about it over many years. And they'll be exploring how we can move forward from megawatts to negawatts, because energy efficiency at the end of the day is the first fuel to meet our energy transition goals. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Bishal Thapa, Chief Strategy and Impacts Officer at CLASP, and Mr. John Kraetz, Chief Executive Officer of RMI. Bishal will be hosting the conversation with John. Please.
Testing the volume. You guys hear a little better now? Yes. A little better? Okay, I think that's good.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome again. Thanks, Tamojit, for that introduction. Thank you for ISA for putting this session. It's great to be able to host John today in a conversation about energy efficiency and supply and integrating the two. I think this place that we're in, COP, is not only symbolic for where we are, but the fact that there is a cooling noise overpowering us is also very symbolic. We obviously have to overcome the intensity of that noise and still make it work for this planet. So fantastic to be in this session that's important from so many different angles.
Big opportunity for passive strategies here, folks.
Absolutely, yeah. We're gonna fully milk this occasion of the noise to throw in the messages. So fantastic. John, let me start with a question about where we are today. We've seen the reports, the analysis that has come about in terms of the two twin engines for the pathway to net zero on tripling renewable energy, doubling energy efficiency. And while we are not where we ought to be in that pathway, there are still some pockets of success. At least it's faster than before, not at the levels that we want, but it's still there. We're seeing some action, perhaps not enough. How do you weigh these successes and optimism? Where, beyond these headlines, what are the kinds of elements in there that both interest you? Where do you see the stress points? Where do you see the opportunities? What is your takeaway from progress that it's been so far towards these two goals?
Yeah, let me step back for a moment here, because I think there is, am I coming through okay? There is a dour sentiment right now that we're not moving as quickly on climate change as we need to be. And that's true, right? We're not on track for our 1.5 degrees, and in fact are going to overshoot in all likelihood at this point. But when we think about how fast we are moving, last year there was over $2 trillion that was going into the clean energy economy and the transition. This year it's going to be over $3 trillion, much more than is going into legacy fossil systems. And I think we all need to put that in perspective, that at the same time we're hitting critical tipping points in nature, we're also hitting critical tipping points in markets. We've certainly seen that as a result of some of the work of ISA here and the work of SE4All in terms of accelerating solar adoption, especially where we're in fact ahead of our tripling target overall on solar. Because wind is moving a little bit slower in aggregate, we're right now on track for something like a 2.6 to 2.8 overall increase in renewables here relative to the 3x goal that was set a couple of years ago. That's good progress, right? When I look at energy efficiency, though, on the energy efficiency front, we were capturing energy efficiency at a rate of about 2% per year back in 2022 when we set the goal. right now, and we wanted to double that. So we wanted to go up to about 4% annual energy efficiency capture per year. We've actually slipped to half of what we were previously. So rather than 2%, we're now down between 1 and 1.5% as a planet. So at a time when we need energy efficiency more, we're actually going more slowly to capture it. And at RMI, we like to think of energy efficiency as the first fuel because it's incredibly cost effective, because every kilowatt hour that you save in energy efficiency actually saves about 3 times the amount of carbon through the system because of all the cascading losses that we have in our current generating system that lead to compounding gains when you start at the end user and you minimize the amount of the end use. You're taking out all of the losses and all of the friction in the system. This is an incredibly powerful thing that we all need to be aware of, that when we use energy efficiency first, it minimizes all of the capital infrastructure, all of the clean energy megawatt hours and gigawatt hours that we need to generate become proportionally 3 times less. That's the way, when we think about what Karan was saying, that's why it is in the end that efficiency and the 3 times target is made possible by the 2x efficiency. We can talk a little bit more about the details, but I think from an overall framing, the opportunity is enormous. The economic incentive is significant, and especially at a time where the world needs more energy for all different reasons, whether it be purely for access, whether it be for increasing, kind of overall demand for cooling or for mobility, or whether it be for new data centers or other things that are drawing on energy. The first fuel that we have, the most cost-effective, the most secure, the most resilient, is always going to be efficiency.
Thank you, John. That was a great overview. I think it segues very nicely into the next point that I wanted to highlight, which is you talked about the role of efficiency as the first fuel, but its ability to also accelerate the introduction and integration of renewable energy. I think this is the first time perhaps that these two goals have been integrated as explicitly. Is it working for countries? Are they seeing these as integrated goals? Are there ways that we can use this new level of integration, the bringing together of efficiency and renewable energy as a way to build the momentum you said existed, but is not incrementally going as fast as we want it to? How do you see the ability of governments, particularly and policymakers, to be able to integrate these two so that it meets their needs, both in terms of the transition we need to make, but also in terms of reducing costs for people, enhancing energy security, improving energy supplies?
Yeah, I think historically these two haven't been seen as integral. And the fact that they both came out together and were intertwined has put much more of a focus. And so while all NDCs weren't equally created, we would say that more and more there's an embedding of efficiency within to help make sure that the renewable targets are ultimately delivered against. So there's a positive step forward on that front. Where we're seeing more and more positive progress is really in the commercial side, where new developments in places like India are starting to look very heavily at the access to energy that they have available from the grid or from other sources, the fuels available, and to plan to minimize their overall footprint in order to ensure that they've got the resilient and low-cost solution required. And a great example of this is Lodha Group, which is one of the largest developers in India, is currently building about 1 million-person city outside Mumbai. And it is building that new city to a compact urban standard with all passive, characteristics around the use of induced draft rather than forced draft in the buildings, the integration of green space around to ensure lower thermal mass within the community, natural shading, reflective paints, and 5 times more efficient air conditioners, right? And we have the technology and the ability now to literally, for the same cost today, produce an air conditioner, a window air conditioner that is 5 times more efficient than what is available readily on the market today. And that's one of the big challenges that we have to address, is that appliances in particular, the average appliance on the market is typically at least half, if not lower than half, of what the leading performance is on the market. And we need to get that average boosted up. But this community in India has already built about 300,000 person units. And the energy consumption of those units is about 80% lower than the average complex in India right now, which means that they can also electrify with solar on the roofs and manage the majority of all of the new cities' energy through direct renewables on site, because they're sipping rather than gulping energy by design. And those types of designs that are built in, you know, kind of the global south for global south prices in order to create access to energy at scale is the exact, you know, these are the inspirational points where we can see integrating that supply and demand simultaneously leads to a better economic solution. It leads to a more resilient solution, and it ultimately leads to, you know, kind of a win for everyone, for the climate, for the economy, et cetera.
Thank you, John. The example of Lodha Group was fantastic, and I want to pick up from that just to add to that question I had previously. Lodha Group represents a type of stakeholder that represents perhaps an aggregator of end users, right? So that's right. But do you see other stakeholders, and in specific, I want to point out like planners at the power sector level and policymakers at the efficiency? Are they enhancing their systems with the kind of digitization and the technological innovation that's coming out to be able to benefit from the integration of renewable energy and energy efficiency so they can address these challenges? And if not, where do you see fundamentally as the core set of challenges or barriers for them to be able to enhance in terms of their planning?
Yeah, I mean, we have very few countries in the world have the ability to plan their energy systems completely. A lot of it happens through entrepreneurial activity and commercial activity. And, you know, we're at a point right now as a planet where we're electrifying at about twice the rate of our energy growth. So we're moving into an age of electricity where that's more and more important. And because of that, there is a logical player within each geography in the utility that starts to integrate in the need for managing infrastructure and the need for managing efficiency alongside the need for growth and the need for provision of resilient energy supplies. And so we really do see the power sector and utilities more and more as a critical stakeholder that's going to be required to engage as we think about integrating efficiency and supply at scale. The challenge is that most utilities are incentivized to sell more electrons, and efficiency, of course, has them selling less electrons in the end. And so developing the new business models that enable them to plan for a system-wide perspective on how to electrify the community while at the same time reducing overall unnecessary consumption in different areas, you know, maybe on appliances, maybe on the built environment, to allow for things like electrified transportation. We need to help those specific players develop the business models that create incentives for them to actually pursue both the efficiency and the electrification at scale. And that's a tricky balance. And right now, the impulse, the reflex from most utilities is to simply build more supply. And the result is, in most places in the world, that's driving rates up, and it's creating an affordability crisis, where in order to manage that affordability crisis, what we need to do is capture energy efficiency alongside supply. And that actually has the opposite effect of allowing the same investments ultimately provide more energy when it's needed for people who need it. And that creates a beneficial reinforcing cycle here of development.
Thank you. I think the theme of trying to use both energy efficiency and renewable energy to reduce costs, enhance flexibility, optimize, move the pathway to cleaner systems, I think is clearly resonated through all of yours. Just one last question as we leave this session. You know, I'm always amazed about the fantastic work that RMI does, and also so many other partners here are also doing equally fantastic work. What's the kind of key message that you want to leave with, particularly as this group and other stakeholders in these conversations? What's the message? Where do you think our emphasis should be in the near term, right? As we face this moment, what are you speaking to your teams, other stakeholders? What's the message you're leaving them with?
Yeah. So cheap, abundant energy is not far off at all. But in order to capture that, we do have to think in an integrative system, and we have to capture the demand side at the same time that we capture the supply side. And if we do that well, we wind up having everybody benefit and costs go down, so that we get to that abundant energy future that creates so much prosperity, but at an affordable price.
Thank you. Fantastic. I think that's a great theme to leave everybody with, bringing the yin and yang of energy, I guess, supply and demand for improved affordability, for reliability, for security. Those are all fantastic. And thanks very much, John, for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here and bearing with some of this variability in the sound. And this is an opportunity for us to roll up our sleeves and get to work. No other way. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bishal. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bishal and John. You've actually warmed up a very warm room with that fireside chat. So this will be a tough act to follow. No pressure to the fellow panelists over here. But we have a very good panel now lined up, where we'll explore how solar energy efficiency, and as Bishal and John were talking about, these elements of demand side management, how do they sort of come together, especially in terms of the integration across these different things and how it sort of creates jobs and livelihoods. So as your moderator for today, I'm very pleased to invite this distinguished panel. So we have Malina Roseman, Director of Portfolio Origination and Management at the Nordic Development Fund. Malina, please. We have Mr. Gilles Vermont Desroches. I'm very sorry for my French. Chief Corporate Citizenship and Institutions Officer at Schneider Electric. And Ms. Nina Campbell, Global Energy Lead at Consumers International. So let's begin with Malina.
Yes.
Especially from the Nordic Development Fund's perspective. I mean, you've been investing probably in solar projects or looking at investing in them. So from a financing perspective, what are the kind of solar and clean energy projects that NDF is prioritizing, and what makes them attractive for a development finance institution?
Okay. Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for inviting me to this session. Can you hear me in the back? I know my voice is not the strongest. So the Nordic Development Fund, just two lines of background. So we're owned by the 5 Nordic countries, and we work in the nexus between climate and development, providing finance in low-income countries. And as you said, we have been building up a portfolio around renewable energy over the past years. And I will, in this first question, focus on one of the programs called the Energy and Environment Partnership for Africa, EEP Africa, where we also act as a fund manager. And EEP Africa, they prioritize early stage innovative solar and clean energy projects across underserved markets in the sub-Saharan Africa region. And we provide grants, repayable grants and technical assistance in this case. And when we look at potential investees, these are four of the features that we look for in particular. They need to demonstrate innovation. It could be technology, business model, or approach, but it also had to really tailor to the local market. And they have to be locally driven and inclusive. And we are especially focusing on how they address gender equality and social impact. They need to address the energy access gap for vulnerable populations, which we often find in urban or peri-urban areas. And they have to show a clear path towards commercial viability and scalability over time, so that they can attract and follow on investment. And in a sort of developed finance perspective, some of the features that are extremely important is that they provide, we provide additionality, that we actually finance where finance is not finding its way. So we're not competing with local markets. We're just bridging the gap to private capital that is more risk averse. We want to see potential to scale and replicate. So there has to be models that can be adapted across markets and geographies. To have the skin in the game, our partners need to co-finance, provide at least 30 to 50% of the finance. So we're in this together. And of course, they have to show measurable impact, a clear contribution to the SDG, not only in energy, but also decent work and climate action and gender.
Thank you so much, Malina. You mentioned bridging the gap to private capital. So we do have private sector in the room. Gilles, turning to you, especially we were, as Bishal and John were talking about, renewables sort of growing, managing electricity demand becomes increasingly important. And we, of course, from smart grids to energy management systems, Schneider Electric has been at the forefront of this. What innovations is Schneider seeing that optimize how solar energy is consumed and managed? And what's ready for scale in the developing countries today that you're working in? And especially if you could talk about the education and skills aspect of it.
Thank you. The world will be solar. We are in a time in transition, but if you have to drive the world in 2050, 60, 70, the world will be solar. And we have to build the transition. Certainly, one of the topics is that today we include the solar energy in the vision that we have of energy, but we don't think differently. And when the world will be solar, the energy will be distributed. And we have to take care to the demand in a better manner than today. Today, in fact, the vision that we have when we discuss in a strategic vision about energy, previously we had some source of electricity. Now we have renewable. And in fact, we think in the same manner. For me, we have 3 points to think differently. The first, when we have to speak about the acceleration of solar energy, we have to speak about digital. Because in fact, it's the same thing. When Schneider Electric, for example, in Uttar Pradesh in India, we implement a smart climate village, which is a small solution to produce energy by solar in order to have energy for people, for lighting, for communication, but for agriculture too, irrigation. We need to be smart. And we need to add efficiency and sufficiency. The manner that we consume electricity everywhere in OECD country is that we think for a long, long time about which type of offer we are, how do we organize the mix, to be sure that we have all the energy that we would like to have each time that we would like to consume. In the future, we need to have another vision and to add energy efficiency and renewable energy. And for that, we need to use digital, but not only digital in the center of the big city, digital everywhere. Never we will provide access to electricity in developing country without distributed solutions. For example, for Africa, we don't have enough raw materials to have the same grid in Africa that in Europe. In terms of copper, in terms of infrastructure, we have to think differently. And to think differently, if to take care to distributed energy everywhere in the villages, not because we have to wait to have, I don't know when, a big infrastructure to be connected to the grid. Never that will be the solution in the 10, 20, and 30 next year. Then we have to think differently this topic. And for me, we can have a concept that we use everywhere, but not in energy, which is a circular economy. Today in industry, we think with circular economy, the new product, how do we refresh, reuse, organize the product, not in a linear mode, but in circular mode, where we are more smarter. When we speak energy today, we have a discussion about the offer side, and very often only about that. And after that, we deploy to have the demand side. Certainly, for the future, with digital and with solar energy, we can build something more smarter, which is close to a circular economy. When we ask each actor of this circularity to be more efficient and more sufficient, because we need to put at the same level the investment for energy efficiency and the investment to shift to electricity, and in electricity to shift to renewable. It's not one topic which could be very capitalistic and the other it's after. We need to think both together and in the same time to take care to the people to be efficient and sufficient. Technology will play a big role in this topic, but not technology alone. It's not to change the technology to be in the same realities that yesterday. We have in the same time to educate people, with skilled people, because today, for example, in Africa, we have enough electricians to electrify 20% a force of Africa. But if we would like to electrify more people in Africa, yes, it's a question of investment. Yes, it's a question of de-risking. Yes, it's a question of innovation. But it's a question of people too. If we don't have enough people to go in the countryside, far for the biggest city in Africa, never we will deploy electricity.
Thank you, Gilles. And one of the key points that I noticed, and you put it very nicely, is we need to look at efficiency and sufficiency at the same time. And that really brings me to the consumer perspective. We've been hearing a lot also about sort of bringing the cost down and how energy efficiency can play a role in affordability. This is very key if we are to sort of expand access to electricity, but keep it reliable as well. So Nina, from that perspective, as solar energy starts to expand, and we've been hearing about grid systems, but also distributed energy from Gilles, what consumer protections do you see as necessary, and how do we ensure that households, especially low income, those at the bottom of the ladder, or the first time energy users, get quality products, fair pricing, and reliable service?
Thanks, Timoji. It's lovely to be here and very pleased to be joining this discussion, bringing that consumer perspective. And from Consumers International, and we're all about putting consumers at the center of the energy transition. Not only because they are actually the people, the households that the whole system is designed to serve, but also because without their support, active support, we won't get through this transition in time. And I think the missing link for this transition has really been that consumer support. It's been consumer trust. Trust in the storyline and the narrative that we're telling, trust in the technology that we're offering, and trust in the market actors that they have to engage with. So how do we build trust? I think that's the main question. Consumers have a lot of hurdles to get through on their consumer journey, their customer journey through energy. It's about where do they find the information, build their own knowledge, how do they access and afford the technology that they need, and how do they get a voice in that process to influence decision making so that the projects are appropriate for their situation. So there's a lot of hurdles in the way for consumers to really actively participate. And you asked about consumer protection. So if I speak directly to that question, because I think we could talk a lot about the affordability challenges and the new business models, the regulatory and policy approaches to address that affordability piece. But in consumer protection, I think it's an issue that's not talked about enough. So I think there are 4 things that we can do to build consumer trust and consumer protection in this transition for solar energy. So number 1 is, so going back to that consumer journey, number 1 is making sure that consumers have access to reliable information about what that is tailored to their needs. So what are the benefits and costs for their particular situation? And they need to be able to get that information from a trusted source. We're at European Climate Fund to help members in local situations build one-stop shop platforms. So information platforms. We've been doing several countries, all in emerging economies at the moment, and Nigeria is a great example. So there are 85 million people without access to electricity in Nigeria right now. Solar is a fantastic solution for them. But what our member there, the Consumer Defense Organization, Cardiff, discovered is that people are really unclear about what the opportunity is, how it works at the household level. So they have built this online platform. They engaged with 500 stakeholders across the whole supply chain, the whole market, but critically, they spoke to consumers about what are their knowledge gaps, what are their concerns. And this online platform is a really trusted, reliable place for those Nigerian households to go and find out the answers to those questions. So reliable information. There's also a piece around product standards. Consumers need to be able to trust that the products that are in the market are actually going to work, they're reliable. So standards to make sure we're not dumping old inefficient equipment in emerging economies, and also labels, of course, to make sure consumers can identify one from the other. Training, capacity building, Jill's mentioned that is absolutely critical. Again, in Nigeria, that was a key issue that came up in all of that consultation. There's just not enough people who know how to do the work correctly. So there's that, but also certification of those installers. So consumers need to be able to trust that the person they're engaging does have the necessary qualifications. So certification for consumers, and then finally redress. So we can install the equipment with all the best intentions, but there are always going to be operations and maintenance challenges. We need to be able to support consumers in that post-purchase space. And that's a huge gap in most emerging economies at the moment. So we'd love to see, we're already seeing consumer organizations fill that space. We've got our member in Pakistan, the Network for Consumer Protection, has run an amazing education and workshop campaign with local consumers to help signpost them to the places where they can get support with their solar installed. So yeah, so the common thread there is trust, signposting for consumers, what they can trust, who they can trust. I'll leave that one there for now.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Nina. And you mentioned trust, and I think the other word that I'm hearing, especially is the solution space and what's really working, right? And if I take it from the consumers again back to development finance, especially Malina, you mentioned about, again, coming back to your point about bridging to private finance, right? And that's where development finance sort of sits. So what kind of financial structures or risk mitigation tools, people talk about blended finance all day long. What is actually working? What successful models have you seen
Yes.
that are working? And could you share an example, please?
Sure, I can do that. Before that, maybe just, I mean, accessibility, it's also about affordability. And when we look for new projects, we also look at what type of models do they have to actually reach the vulnerable populations. So pay-as-you-go system.
All of this, though, require a certain behavior change from consumers as well. So consumers have a role to play in the energy transition. So what does it take to make these models work for everyday people? And what are the sort of adoption barriers and enablers that you see?
Yeah, thanks, Tamaji. It's an excellent question because you might be aware that the IPCC has identified that actually between 40 and 70% of the emissions reductions that we need before 2050 will come from the demand side. So all of this is so critical, and consumers are a piece of that. There's a huge role to play, and we need to see consumers stepping up much more strongly than they have so far. But I feel that we've you mentioned demand side flexibility there. I wanted to speak to that a bit because I think it's, alongside energy efficiency, it's a really exciting way to offer consumers some direct tangible benefit as part of this renewable energy transition. Because to get consumer buy-in on this transition, we really need to be able to show the returns at the individual household level. And at the moment, a lot of what's coming through is price increase around the additional build. But there's something really exciting in Demand Flex. We have the opportunity to give directly back to households. But we need to do some work to get consumers on board for that. So again, it's about trust. So and awareness and comfort levels with what's on offer. So we need to tell a really clear and satisfying story to consumers to give them the assurance that this is an opportunity that it's going to protect ease and convenience. It's not going to interfere with the way people use power in their homes, the cultural practices, the family practices, but it can be done in a smooth way that will provide direct benefit to them. So those information campaigns from trusted messengers are going to be really key to get consumers on board. The other thing is making it easy. And to do that, we have to recognize that all consumers are different. We have to become much more sophisticated about the way that we understand consumer needs and practices and experiences. We need to draw on a much richer base of consumer insights. And a plug for Consumers International here, we have a lot of insight in that space. We've done work building consumer archetypes, and 4 simple consumer archetypes that help to tailor messaging to groups depending on where they are in that journey of comfort, awareness, and also income and ability to shift. And that's a really key piece, the ability and the income. And you asked about vulnerable groups before, and I really want to speak to that because the reality is not everybody is going to be able to invest in the smart connected technology. Not everybody has the ability to shift their demand, in particular vulnerable groups. And I'm talking, of course, about low-income groups and the upfront cost there, but also other types of vulnerable groups. So there are issues around age. And in fact, Demand Flex might be a space where older consumers have more ability to shift demand. And it's actually the young single-parent households with kids to feed and a lot of household tasks that will struggle to participate in that. So how do we bring them on board? There's issues around household tenure. Renters are going to struggle to participate. It's a different challenge for rural and urban communities. So we really need to get more intelligent about how we communicate with them. And it's not going to be just about providing grants and subsidies to get people on board. We really want to see those vulnerable, more vulnerable consumer groups being brought actively along on the journey, not to be brought in as the laggards at the end of this process. So that really takes some sophisticated and deliberate program design. And I think there's a huge opportunity here around collective models. So we've seen great programs which go after, for example, social housing blocks. So getting a group of tenants, for example, in a social housing block together to aggregate their potential for demand flexibility, aggregate their ability to upgrade their technology to smart technology. Another one is collective purchasing schemes. So a lot of our members are working on collective purchasing schemes where groups of consumers, more vulnerable or low-income consumers, can get together their resources, pull their, get the economy of scale and access technology at lower prices. We've seen that happening, great work happening in the Netherlands and several of the Nordic countries. We're also seeing it in Thailand. The Thailand Consumer Council has done a great piece, crowdsourcing, funding, and getting low-cost solar panel installed. So there's a lot of opportunity there. I think it's a really exciting space for consumers, but we just need to be more sophisticated about how we engage with consumers if we want them to really be part of this transition. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have time for one audience question, or are we at, yeah? Are there any questions from the audience? No? Okay. I think we did quite a good job, especially because we had the whole value chain. I was just thinking about it, all the way from policy enablers to finance to the implementers, the private sector and consumers. So I really hope that this was an informative discussion for all of you. Thank you so much to the International Solar Alliance again for hosting us and for partnering on this event. And thank you again to the panelists and to the Fireside Chat participants as well for today's discussion. So we'll be there. Thank you.